Salesforce sharing, OWD, ownership, and role hierarchy.
Hello. Today we're going deeper into Salesforce record level security. We're going to be going through org-wide defaults, OWDs. We're going to be going through record ownership, and we're going to be talking about the role hierarchy.
We're continuing our conversation on record level sharing and visibility. We're talking about how we can control whether a particular record in Salesforce, what I consider like a file in the file cabinet, is visible to a specific user or not. And again, from a previous video, we're assuming that the user has object level security, which is a separate set of controls granted through the profile permission set groups. Sharing is accomplished with a series of mechanisms, some out of the box, some specified by configuration or code. We're going to be focusing in on the top level ones that control the overall security and moving from there. Overall, one of the initial settings you make is when you have a particular object that you want to share, you're going to set its OWD, organization org-wide defaults. If we're making the baseline assumption that a user has full visibility to an object, they have, let's say, read or read write to a particular object, and you've got to decide if they have visibility to an object, should they be able to see all records at all times? If the answer is all records, then you can give them public read write. This means that all users who can see and have profile or permission set level access to edit can edit all records. Now, if there are particular scenarios where certain records should not be editable, then you should make it public read-only. If there are certain scenarios where certain records should be hidden, then you should make it private. There are some settings for out-of-the-box objects that are derivatives of the account object. That would be the ones that have settings for control by parent and some of the other out-of-the-box objects. But for most objects and for custom objects, you're going to be looking at public read-write. Everyone has full access. Public read-only. Read but not edit. And private. Now again, this is not set. This is a separate mechanism from their profile permission set. Once you set your org-wide defaults, going to the right, if there is an owner, and that owner will have read-write on that record. So if you've got 100 records owned by user 1 and 1 record owned by user 2, and you've set it to private, then the 100 records will only be seen by user 1 and the 1 record will only be seen by user 2. Now what you can do is build a role hierarchy. We'll be walking through that. And then what you can do is you can check a box which says grant access using the hierarchy. What that means is that a particular user who owns a record and they're in the role hierarchy, it will grant access upward in the hierarchy. So if someone's a manager and they have a vice president, then the vice president will gain access to the hierarchy and all the way up to the top of the role hierarchy. So these are 3 key mechanisms. They're your baseline. Whenever you start setting up security in Salesforce, one of the first places you go is for object level security is set up. After you set up your profiles permission sets for record level security, you come in and set the OWD. You set up your hierarchy and you're aware of your record ownership. So set the OWD to the most restrictive. Now you want to be aware of future Experience Cloud configurations, so watch your external visibility. Know what data is private in the record. Watch your attachments, child records related to master details. Be aware and set your org-wide defaults for the most restrictive of the security you could be looking forward to. Now, there are standard objects. Many of them have slightly different behavior. The lead has public read, write, and the transfer. Account and contact have the settings around control by parent. You have other out-of-the-box objects, order, contact, asset, opportunity. These all have slightly different behavior than custom objects. There are some additional settings. You can decide whether standard report visibility will be enabled. There's a caveat there. You want to minimize the number of roles created for performance, grant the user access to related cases, secure the guest user record, require permissions to view the record names and lookup fields. These are all additional record level and data level security elements on the OWD, the sharing screen. Now, you want to build a hierarchy. This is where you would have, in this particular one, you'd have a VP and a manager 2. These are all, manager is a subordinate to VP. Manager 2 is also a subordinate. So this is important. It's not just how the records, how your organization is structured, but how the records will be shared. Now you can have add a role, which are adding branches on the tree. Now there are some settings you're going to look at, some of the default settings. We'll be looking at those, but it's important that you be familiar with how to add a role. So I'm inside of a test sandbox. I'm going to type sharing, and I can go to sharing settings. And you'll see that I get to see the org-wide defaults, and you'll see some of the out-of-the-box settings. Public read-write for account and contract. We have controlled by parent, public read-only. These are some of the default settings. And then it goes through the out-of-the-box Salesforce objects, and then it's going to be adding in your custom objects afterward. Now, you can add additional settings for portal access, site visibility access. Here's where you can decide if records can share with their managers and subordinates, minimize the number of roles, secure the guest user. What we're going to do is we're going to take an existing object that I've created, and we're going to change its sharing to private. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the runway object, and we're going to make it private. So this is an object where I've loaded in runways for airports. I've changed it to private, and I'm going to hit save. Now this is going to trigger the sharing recalc, so it'll take just a moment. So the sharing recalc is completed. You'll notice that OA runways is marked private. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my role hierarchy, set up the roles. Now what I'm going to do is under the VP, I'm going to actually add a top level role. Let's call it airport director. We'll call it runway director. Okay. So this is a top level role. There are no roles above it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my roles, set up the roles. I'm going to say, don't show this to me, set up the roles. Now what I'm going to do is add a role below runway. I'm going to go runway manager. So this is a manager, which is subordinate to the director. Now I'm going to go back to roles. I don't want to show up the page. So now I have a runway director and a runway manager. And then I'm going to add a role below that for just a pilot. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign a user to the pilot role. And I have a user called Paul. So you can see I did all unassign, Paul the pilot. So Paul, the pilot, is now in the pilot role. Now I'm going to go to the manager. I'm going to assign the users. All unassigned. Manny the manager. And now I'm going to go to the director. I'm going to assign a user. All unassigned. David the director. Okay. So now what I have is I have created a role hierarchy with a single director, single manager, and a pilot, and I placed a user in all three of those. Now what I need to do is to make sure they have access, so I'm going to go airport view. We're going to make it runway view, demo view. Okay. Now we're going to do, not base it on a license, but what I'm going to be able to do is I'm going to go to the object level permissions. I'm going to go find the runway object. All right. It's right here. Now what I'm going to do is grant them access to the tab, making it visible. I'm going to give them read, and we're going to give them all fields. So whoever has this permission has read on the runways and can see all fields. Now what we're going to do is we're going to manage the assignments. We're going to add an assignment. We have David, manager, Manny, and Paul. So this grants them all access to the structural security, but it does not grant them to the record security. So I'm logging in with Paul. In with Paul the pilot, I go to the runways and I search, and I have access to the runway object, but I do not have access to any of the particular records. Now I'm logged in as Manny the manager, and from here I'm going to go look, and I'm in this still demo org is in classic, and I'm going to go OA runways, and I see access to the object, but I don't have access to any of the records. So both the manager and the pilot at this point have no access to any records. Now I'm back in as sysadmin. I'm on a particular runway, and I change the owner to Paul, the pilot. So I'm going to go submit. So now Paul, the pilot, now owns this record. And now I'm logged in as Paul, the pilot. I go to runways, go, and now I see a single record that is owned by Paul, the pilot. So because Paul has become owner, he is now able to see this runway. Now I'm logged in as Manny the manager. The owner was changed to Paul, but Manny is above Paul in the role hierarchy. So I'm going to go to the runway object, OA runways, I'm going to go. And so now Manny has been granted access to the runway object by being above Paul in the role hierarchy, while the role hierarchy access was enabled. So as you saw, we're able to set up the private on the record. We're able to set up a role hierarchy with the manager down to the pilot. We showed that they had no access, and then we changed the owner to make the pilot. We saw that that gained access to the one and the only one record, and we saw that the person above him in the role hierarchy was able to see the record also. So this is a basic demonstration of making a record private, granting access to the hierarchy, changing owner. So, hope this was a helpful video. We're going to continue to dive deeper. Stay organized with OWD. Join us again, same bat time, same bat channel. Subscribe to SteveTechArc at YouTube and join me on www.stevetecharc.com. Have a great day.